You're in the right place. Hello, I'm Dan Harris.
Hi, and I'm Claudia Koestler.
You're over here, over there. Welcome to Over Here, Over There. I'm Dan Harris, joined by my co-host Claudia Koestler. Today, we're discussing what many people in the world have just witnessed, while others deliberately not watched it, and that is Donald Trump's inauguration as the 47th president of the United States. Claudia, what's your reaction on this momentous event, especially on Trump's speech? I really want to know.
Okay, well, you'll get it very raw and very personal, not with my journalist hat on because I'm here privately, but holy cow. I mean, I was a little bit nervous beforehand, and all the way watching it, listening to it, I got more and more nervous, like I was getting a bad diagnosis at a doctor's office, and you kind of realize immediately that this is something tremendously changing your entire life, whilst the other part of your brain denies it and still seeks out for, there must be something good in it. Come on, it won't be that horrible. It can't just not be that horrible. Trump's speech was Trump 2.0, very divisive and textbook populism, I'd say. He portrayed himself as a champion of the common people, claims to be the sole representative of those people, rejecting other viewpoints, and he simplified so many complex issues, and he mastered the appearance of being the strong man in a way.
There you go.
But say he was constantly contradicting himself in a way. I mean, basically, to sum it all up, remember last time when Bush actually said that was some weird shit? This time I'd go a step further and say that was horrendous shit. And I feel like I'm being a person that has been morphed into a history book on the day that the US has turned sour. I feel like on a bad breakup with my favorite person in the world.
That is very interesting the way, that is, sitting over here outside the United States, and that is well put. That is well put. So it feels like a breakup. There's a disengagement happening, isn't it?
Yeah. And I've mentioned it before. He contradicted himself so many times, and he claimed to be a peacemaker and unifier. My ass. Everything else he said was just the very opposite of that,
Like he was going to take Panama.
Absolutely. And this entire America first, and now, renaming the Gulf of Mexico American. And he seems to be determined to rewrite the rules of international engagement single-handedly. I mean, this doesn't align with any good leadership models in my way, because that bringing people up to your level and seeing them on your level and not being the superior all the time, the winner, all this strongman shit that is going on now, which means it's always a very bullying power game. And I don't think this is good partnership in any way.
No. It was that word bully that really comes to the fore, doesn't it? When you listen to that speech, and the way he also played the victim as well, saying I got shot in the ear, the weaponization of the DOJ, that won't happen again, bringing law and order into the streets. Well, frankly, most crime in the United States under Biden has gone down.
Absolutely. Yes.
And also the economy. Yes, it did have a peak of inflation after the oil crisis caused by the Ukraine-Russia war, but it's gone down. It's at a manageable level, down at some very low rates. And Biden had increased jobs by 12 or 15 million, where he lost jobs, or allowing for the COVID crisis. Before and after that, he lost jobs. He was in negative territory as far as creating jobs go. So anyway, I agree totally with what you're saying. As far as my impression was, he wanted to put himself as the strong man. And it also bordered on culture war. A lot of those things. And this is how he won. We know he won because they played the culture war, the Republicans, and they did it a lot better than the Democrats. So he went down through the list as far as ending the woke agenda, ending, he said, social engineering into private life, make it all merit-based, and there's only two definitions of gender, and that's male and female, and that has a lot of repercussions, and we'll see how it plays out over the course of the first 6 months at least in a year, see what happens, what he's putting in place for that. And, of course, defeating America's enemies, he said. So, like you said, I agree when you mentioned peacemaker and unifier, but just before that, he was talking about defeating America's enemies. And did you notice that he didn't mention, I didn't catch it at least, Ukraine or Russia, or he did mention China, of course, and to criticize them.
I didn't catch that either. Yes.
I think that the difference also between him and Biden is, I saw this quote by a congressman, a Democratic congressman, said that Biden really tried to promote American values, but not American power, where Trump is promoting American power, but not American values. I thought that encapsulates it perfectly over the last 4 to 8 years. And now we got another 4 years of power over values. You know, when we were talking about Henry Kissinger after he passed away, and the way he played power politics. Power politics with Henry Kissinger was, we're for you if you support us and democracy, whether you're a dictator or a democratic leader. That's how Kissinger played it in his foreign policy, where here it is with Trump. It's, if you suck up to me, if you flatter me, I'm the leader and all power resides from me. And that is really the definition of fascism. Fascism is the absolute power of the state, which is embodied by its leader. So if you listen to that speech, those echoes are coming back through that and what that means, you could really see what we're getting at when people say that he has authoritarian tendencies. And now he's really trying to put it into practice. And we can talk about how he's going to do that later. But still, how do you think this will play in Europe?
Good question. I think most European leaders are worried, and the potential erosion of rule-based international order is probably coming. And Europe as such needs to address that. You know, we already know that he's cozying up to authoritarian leaders, and he has a disdain for institutions like NATO and the EU. So there is an existential threat to European security and sovereignty. So I absolutely believe that Europe must, gear up in a way and get together and try and unify even more and not break up over the course of the next months and years to come, because some might cozy up to Trump, others might try and find other ways. The strategic control of their own countries, putting that first. Let's put it that way. So there is a lot of potential for further division instead of unifying voice. So Europe must find a united voice and backbone, and that is hard to come by.
I agree, because what Trump would do and what bullies do is they seek to divide and pick on the individual countries. And he didn't mention NATO. At least I didn't catch it.
No,
I didn't hear much talk about Europe whatsoever in the speech. No common cause, no protecting democracies around the world. He just talked about protecting American interests. And he did mention
interests.
Yes, mostly economical.
Yeah.
And
drill,
he
baby,
did mention,
drill.
and he did mention one time that protect the Constitution, and of course, how ironic. And I'm sure there were groans in certain parts of the audience there. It's something that the Europe has to really, I agree totally, has to stand on its own feet now. And I think they realize that. I think they're probably even game playing this now as far as how we do this, how do we deal with Trump, and how do we protect ourselves, because we can't rely, we can't trust. We can't trust the U.S. And from that speech given, there was no hand of friendship that I saw extended to Europe on that one. If I were the Baltic states or one of the frontline countries towards Russia, I would be concerned that nothing was mentioned, and no support, no nothing. So I think he didn't want to disturb the horses just yet, so to speak, at this point, but I'm sure it's coming.
Absolutely. I fully agree. And we are talking much about Europe, but I do think that we need to find common ground based on values. And that might not only include Europe and other countries that are known as Western countries, but we have to be watchful and on the lookout what other countries we can share our values, our Western democracy values, and form new partnerships and leaderships with them.
Yes. Well, I would add a little bit further. I totally agree about values, but now what we're also talking about is Europe adding power to that themselves by bolstering their economies and their I have to say
Military.
it, military. But
Yeah.
I'll go even further, and they also got to make sure that their democracies are very sound. They can enact and make decisions. It's strange to think that America was sort of like, quote unquote, the leader of the democratic world, at least the Western world. But if you look at what's happening both in the States, well, certain parts of Europe, democracy is being eroded, but still most of Western Europe is held firm against authoritarian movements. I know that we got the movement of AfD, Meloni in Italy, and various other movements like in the Netherlands and stuff like that, and in reform in the UK. But still, democratic values are still there. But now you have to add the power and strength around the economy, around the military to prepare yourself, because you just can't rely on what's going to happen. And I think NATO will come to an end of sorts by the end of his presidency.
You're listening to Over Here, Over There with your hosts Claudia Koestler and me, Dan Harris. We'd like to thank some of our partners and friends who helped make this podcast possible. Tim and Catherine Mountain at Even Load Films and Productions, Chris Davis at Chris D Projects Web Design, avid listeners and supporters Ann and Adam Wilcox of Rochester, New York, and Gene Fleming in Portland, Oregon. Check out our website at overhereoverthere.org and our social media channels. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Now, back to our show.
Well, wow. The question also is for me, what to do on a personal level and what can, ordinary politicians do? Because you feel sometimes so powerless. You watch it on telly, you see this guy now on television doing this speech, and you know that there are things to come that might impact your life and not for the better. So, there is one thing, keeping level-headed and sane and keep one's own agenda and try and not despair. But what would you do, Dan?
What would I do? Well, it's got to be across the board as far as what does the opposition do? How do you fight back in a way from this? And that is certainly that you have to improve the communication, especially of the Democrats in the United States. Their communication strategy was not very good, to say the least. And they really were focusing on issues that were, they didn't speak with one voice. And there were issues, although important, but they were minor compared to how the message was being driven by the Republicans. They were the ones who driving a very unified economic message, whether it was right or wrong, and it was wrong, but they still had their audience believing that they were the ones who could improve their lives. And we know from the previous Trump administration, it was chaotic. It was chaotic for 4 years, and we were all exhausted from that. And do we think we're going to get anything different? No, I don't think we're going to get anything different. I think it's going to be chaotic. We have to really organize ourselves, get a clear message across Democratic parties, that's just with a small d, and that includes Republicans and Democrats who share the same values. And that goes across also all countries in Western Europe and around the world. We've got to start thinking more strategically and also not be afraid to flex our muscles, our democratic muscles, and really to stand up for ourselves a lot better. Don't assume that democracy is going to exist always. It's very fragile, as we saw 4 years ago during the January 6th riot. So it's very fragile, even in the strongest country in the world. So I think that most of the leaders, especially the NATO countries, recognize that. And I just hope that they're preparing smartly and getting ready for having to really be more independent-minded to protect their own democracies.
I agree. And I would like to see moderate parties and moderate people work together more closely. They should form bonds. They should communicate. They should form bubbles, because it is so important. If a moderate party starts to lash out against the other moderate party just because it's the easy pick, it will drive people more to the extremists. And that is so important that we keep all those moderates more together than we have them at the moment, whether it is within our own countries or over countries, borders, cooperation, look out for the values, for the core values, and work together. That is so, so important. And have visions, policies to tackle the root causes, because there is discontent all over the place. Of course, there are problems to be addressed, but not by populists, please. That is just exploitation. So we need to give people and voters a positive alternative.
And I would extend that a little bit further to say, and I agree about the moderate parties. But I think if a coalition can be put together, let's just use the States, for instance, but this could be Germany or any country, but even the far left or even parts of the right, if your value system is that you value democracy and democratic norms and behavior, and we have something to talk about. Now, we might disagree on policies, but the baseline is, do we believe in this form of government? It's gotten down to that level. And so I'd like to see, just using, again, the United States as an example, the Liz Cheneys and Adam Kissinger and people were anti-Trump, those type of folks, along with moderates and far left people, doesn't matter. First thing is secure your democracy. It's almost like a MASH unit. Keep the patient alive. And then we'll work on everything else from there. We've got to keep the patient alive. Now, people listen to the speech today think, oh, maybe we're going overboard. Did he mean all that or whatever? Well, there's a lot of good indications from that speech, reading between the lines for those who really watch this thing every day, that from what he said and what he didn't say, that you feel like the risk has increased now as far as what you said in the very beginning about the world order, and that we're looking at a new world order. And so we got to prepare for it.
I fully agree. Not only was it the speech, have you looked at those that attended the inauguration speech? You had all those billionaires, all those tech pros there. So the power has increased so much in comparison to 2017. It is something we can really be worried. But I'm clutching straws here. Positive straws. Dan, do you think that we might be talking about 4 years, but maybe we are only talking about 2 years' time he has because of the midterms?
That's true. That's a very good point. That he has probably about 18 months that he can enact. So that the signing of executive orders straight away, that is symbolic, but it's also being proactive on his part. He's trying to sprint out of the blocks and address a lot of these campaign promises about both political and cultural and social. So he's trying to really hit the ground running here. One is reestablish himself as the big boy on the block, but still he really has to move very quickly to do some of these things. It's going to take some time. So he's putting his executive orders out there as far as immigration goes, energy policy, drilling and things like that right away. And then he does have all the levers of power in his favor. He's got Congress. He's got a sympathetic Supreme Court. He's trying to change through Project 2025, civil service. So he's trying to make it all work for him. But it's going to be interesting to see how fast he moves. Now, he's got a lot of supporters that it's different from the previous administration, where you had more established personnel at the top, those old-fashioned Republicans that believed in democracy and would stand up for democracy and had principles and values like that. Now he's putting in place at the top are more yes men, the RFK Juniors and Tulsi Gabbard across the intelligence community. So those people are not going to stand up to Trump. So he has to move fast. He'll work through them. But he does have some very clever people around him, like Special Advisor Stephen Miller, who's, to me, a very nasty individual, especially on immigration and what he wants to do there. He has people who really know their stuff and know the government well and how it operates, who are now more empowered than before. Like this Russell Vogt that is in the Office of Management and Budget, who really will have a critical role in determining what happens with the Project 2025 and how it really will undermine a lot of the civil service employees, like through Schedule F. That means that Trump will be putting more political appointees throughout the civil service who will do his bidding so he can get whatever he wants done as quickly as possible. So yes, midterm elections, hopefully the Democrats will win back the House and be able to put a big roadblock in the way as far as funding, because the House really controls the budget when it comes to legislation. So we'll see what happens over the next 2 years. He's got to deliver on what he's promising with prices. He's saying that, I'm going to bring down prices. Well, tariffs are not going to bring down your prices. He's saying that China and everyone else are going to pay for those tariffs. No. Those tariffs are going to be passed on to the American consumer. So will the prices come down? let's wait and see. But economic theory says, no, that's not how it works.
There is lots to talk about, Dan. I think there is at least a couple of other episodes coming.
We'll have a lot to say on that. And
Yes.
well, thank you, Claudia, for these insights. And we had a pretty good rant there, didn't we? But thank you to our listeners. We'll continue to monitor these developments and bring you updates as the situation evolves. This is Dan Harris for Over Here, Over There, along with Claudia Koestler. And please remember to like and subscribe and share our podcast with others. So stay tuned for another unmissable episode of Over Here, Over There.